anytime watching video essays on war movies, you will probably have encountered 007 François Truffaut's famous quote, "There's no such thing as an anti-war film." If a movie's role 014 is to transport the viewer into the thoughts, emotions, and lived experience of the soldiers 020 on screen, then making an anti-war film is indeed impossible. Nevertheless, many directors of course 027 have tried to do this, and often to great cinematic effect. Saving Private Ryan, for example, draws us 033 into the subjective experience of war by using a handheld point-of-view camera, style that immerses 040, the viewer into the chaos and violence as if they were one of the soldiers on screen. And 1917 tries 046 to do the same by making the movie seem like one shot. Director Sam Mendes explains that he tried 053 to lock the audience into the men's experiences, the feeling that you are going to live through the 058 story with them. However, no matter how immersive the experience, the fact remains that the viewer 116 will always watch these war films from a safe environment, without the mortal fear the soldiers 122 in these wars experience. And thus, according to Truffaut, no matter how gruesome or horrific the 129 violence on screen, it will always devolve into spectacle. WWI veteran Samuel Fuller once remarked 136 even that, for a film to be true to the actual nature of war, bullets would need to be sprayed 141 out from the screen, taking out members of the audience at random in scattershot carnage. Yet, 147 in my opinion, this does not mean that there is no such thing as an anti-war film, although they 153 are probably more rare than one might think. In this video, I want to argue why All Quiet on the 159 Western Front is one of those rare movies, a true anti-war film, and a film that broke my heart, and 206 at various moments had me close to tears. So what makes an anti-war film? In the past decades, 212 mini-war films have focused on showing the reality and gruesomeness of war. And although 218, as I stated before, these films can never let their audiences experience the same horrors these 224 soldiers feel. They do break through important pro-war myths, one of which is what I would call 230 the victorious warrior myth. This is the myth that wars are survivable based on your skill set. 242 throughout history, young men have been eager to go to war because, despite their danger, 247 wars are also a way to adventure, glory, a chance to prove to be better than the men in front of 250 for you. And the belief is that although going to war certainly brings dangers with it, 305, if you prepare well and are careful, you will certainly survive. In more recent war movies, 311, this is of course what the boot camp sequence is about. Although of course, military training 325 has huge advantages, and there are things that can be done to slightly increase your chance of 331 survival. More often than not, war is random carnage and destruction, a meat grinder where 340 for survival is based on sheer luck, and where the survival rate becomes near zero if you spend 350 too much time at the front, or if you are placed in an unlucky position by your superiors. As a 356 veteran of World War II remarked, at first I knew I would survive because, well, I was me. For 02 then I thought I might die unless I trained hard and was very careful. For 06 then later I realized I was already dead. But not all war movies that show the gruesome carnage. For 17 and random death of soldiers, without a single chance of survival are necessarily anti-war for 22 movies. A famous example of this is Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan. As scholar Agnieszka for 28 Minette points out in her paper, Is There Such a Thing? As an anti-war film, Saving Private Ryan for 34 depicts combat as brutal. Yet World War II itself is sacred, and its generation's sacrifice is seen for 42 as deeply honorable. In fact, it is hard to find any film that suggests World War II was not and for 48 important war to have fought and won. Of course, we know the reason for this. I often think about 450 for this scene in Band of Brothers, where Easy Company is riding past defeated German soldiers for 59, and Private Webster shouts out in frustration. Of course. Later in the same episode, aptly called 513 Why We Fight, we find out exactly the reason for them being there. It is possible that the 519 Second World War was a pro-war war, a war worth fighting, even dying for. Yet there are some 526 historians that are questioning the Second World War's role as the quote-unquote good war. 531, and certainly just as any other war. World War II saw brutality, evil, and innocent deaths on 538 both sides. Whether World War II was a good war or not, it is certain that in the endless wars of 540 for history, very few have been worth fighting and dying over. In the last 70 years, World War II 551 as a just and good war has been used to get young men to die for the greed, ambitions, and narcissism 558 of those in power. Which brings me to what is the core aspect of a true anti-war film. As Manette 604 writes, the ideological underpinning of the military as an institution depends on the fiction 609. That every soldier's death matters, that it has agency, and that it strengthens the nation for 615 which it occurs, either militarily or in some other more mystical way. Often the ritual power 621 of sacrifice. An anti-war movie needs to break through the myth of heroic sacrifice. The idea 628 that a soldier's death is meaningful. To expose the old lie, Deus et decorum est pro patria mori. 635, or in English, it is sweet and proper to die for one's country, for a film to be truly anti-war. 641, Manette argues, a film would need to show war not only as ineffective, morally wrong, destructive 646 to the soldier, civilian, and society that accepts it, but also show death in combat as meaningless 652 and utterly unredeemed. The problem is that narrative film is better at enchantment than 659 disenchantment, better at activating myth and creating magic through spectacle than breaking 7-0 for through myth. But I would argue All Quiet on the Western Front is in fact a true anti-war film. I mean, the first moments in the film that really hit me hard was the opening sequence. 717, the strongest aspect of this opening sequence is the dichotomy between the young boys, who 722 are getting destroyed in the war, and the uncaring war machine. I mean, the soldier we follow in the 728. Opening moments is a minor character, but his fear and humanity sounds true in the way he calls his 734. Friends who are getting killed in front of him. And in the sequence after that we see the turning 746, cocks of the war machine, the meat grinder. Killed boys are stripped of their uniforms, 752 including the soldier we just witnessed, the mud, blood, and guts washed away, 757, and the holes and tears were stitched. Uniforms ready for a new batch of hopeful recruits to 803 wear while they march to their death. The officers and generals fully aware of what they are doing. 821, this opening immediately breaks through the myth of the heroic sacrifice. 825, the idea of remembrance. It shows that these soldiers were just cannon fodder to be discarded 831 after, and does exactly what Manette argues a true anti-war film should do. It shows dying in combat 837 as meaningless and utterly unredeemed. I want to draw a comparison between All Quiet on the 843 Western Front and the most recent major World War I movie 1917. I feel All Quiet on the Western Front 851 is the film that 1917 should have been. Now, don't get me wrong. I regard 1917 very highly, and I, 859, think it is a great film where Sam Mendes did something very special for the war movie genre 905, with its one-shot technique. But I think it could have been a stronger anti-war movie. 9/11, a stronger World War I film, better at showing the sheer brutality of the war. That it was a 9/17 pointless meat grinder without any form of remembrance or heroic purpose for millions 9/22 of young men. Because 1917 is essentially a hero's journey where our protagonist prevails 929 in the end and saves the lives of 1,600 men. As my colleague, Tom from Like Stories of Old 935, points out, would the film not have a stronger message more in line with the reality of World 940? War won if in the end our protagonist had failed to deliver the message or his message was ignored by 947 command and all the men died anyway. Of course, this would have been quite a bold and un-Hollywood 953 creative choice. But All Quiet on the Western Front does exactly that by having its main 959 character die a pointless death seconds before the end of the war with nothing gained. 10:05, the sad historical reality is that between the signing of the armistice at 5 a.m. in the morning 10/11 and the official end of the First World War, 3,000 more people died, including an American soldier, 10/17, called Henry Gunther. In the last minute of the war, the reason for the 6-hour delay between 10:22 signing the armistice and it going into effect was supposedly to have time to pass the news 10:27 across the front line. But it was also because of the poetic symmetry it would bring to the end of 10:33 the war, to end it on the 11th hour on the 11th day of the 11th month. So the narcissistic drive 10:48 for poetic meaning by the generals cost another 3,000 men their lives. 3,000 men who would not see 10:50 for their mothers, fathers, girlfriends, fiancés, wives, or children again. Finally, I do think it is 11 o'clock. Important to say that a film is not automatically better when it is an anti-war movie. Historically 1107. Heroism does happen in wars, and these stories deserve to be told. But we must also be aware 1113 that war movies have a real influence on our society. Monet points out that